Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studios. We continue to celebrate all the amazing people who are working so hard in the trenches to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Listen, from time to time, we have shows that deal with topics. And you know, most of the time we're dealing with shows that talk about leadership and, you know, what it takes to build a great community. One example of that is the show I had last week with Tish Williams, and then the second half of the show was with T. McCovey. Tish from the Hancock County Chamber, such a great leader that's worked in the community since after Hurricane Katrina to help Hancock County be a wonderful place to live, work, and play. And then T. McCovey, head of the United Way in Jackson, George, and Greene County. And, you know, T's just doing great work, works closely with Paige Roberts from the Jackson County Chamber, who was on the show yesterday, for a matter of fact. But T's doing great work. And I learned that after Hurricane Katrina, T and Tish actually worked together over in Hancock County after Katrina. At the time, T was involved in the Wind Job Centers, and so they spent a lot of time burning midnight oil to help sort of the community recover. But it's so interesting to see all this institutional knowledge that we have and how it's being used. We don't have as much as we used to have, but still, such good stuff. But good, you know, those are great examples of leaders that are working hard in the community. Of course, last week I had Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and he hasn't broken the story yet, so I can't tell you what it is. But the next time Jeff is on the show, we'll talk a little bit about the access that he's got since he's been reporting the NFL and other news for so long. He's on the NFL Hall of Fame Selection Committee, and he was able to leverage his relationships to get a really cool story that we'll be able to talk about the next time that Jeff's on the show. So we're lucky to have Jeff each and every week to talk about, you know, really behind the scenes, what's happening with the Saints. And the only other show that I want to mention before we get to our guest today is I want to really bring your attention to the conversation I had with Joe Max Higgins. He's from the Golden Triangle Development Link. They're the economic development arm for that region. He's the one who previously said coastal Mississippi would be an 800-pound gorilla if the 6 counties would ever come together and do the kind of things that they're doing up in the Golden Triangle, but spending tens of millions of dollars developing these super sites and attracting businesses up in that area that are doing billions of dollars worth of development. It was a great conversation, but what we did, though, is that we built on a conversation that Wesley Smith, who's head of tourism in a certain area of the Delta, is located in Greenville. But Wesley and I talked about the tourism effort that he's involved in, but we talked about the broader challenges of economic development in the Mississippi Delta. And so what I did is, after I got an update from Joe Max Higgins about what he's involved in, we actually had a conversation about what would we do if we were both there, especially Joe Max Higgins leading the economic development effort for the Mississippi Delta. What would he do? And it was a really interesting conversation. And I've since then heard from people from the Mississippi Delta, and we're going to keep this conversation going. I'll have representatives from the Mississippi Development Authority on soon. Hopefully we'll reach out to the governor's office and get some input from them. But the goal would be to really focus in on what we might be able to do to keep the conversation going about how to launch an effort in the Mississippi Delta that might help them improve their numbers. Now, a lot of the efforts the governor's involved in today have actually improved many of the counties in the Mississippi Delta. So the point is, when you have billions of dollars being spent in economic development in Mississippi, it helps the tide rise for the whole state of Mississippi, and that's a good thing. So I just wanted to bring your attention to those shows. Okay, so now let's shift gears. We're in the heart of hurricane season. I wanted to invite my friend Josh Morgerman, the top hurricane chaser in the world. He lives during the hurricane season in his new home in Hancock County, and he's speaking to the world about how much he loves Bay St. Louis. In fact, he actually refers to himself as a Bay Rat now, which I love because he is talking to the world. He's kind of our built-in tourism shouter to the rest of the world. But anyway, without any further ado, and fresh back from his chase of Hurricane Debby is Josh Morgerman. How you doing, my friend?
Good, Ricky. Nice to be back. Nice to hear you start the show talking about Hancock County. Appreciate it. You big shots in Harrison County talking about us.
Yeah. Hey, listen, in fact, Tish said that she was really thrilled to have met you, and she's excited about, the message you're sending to the world about Hancock County. But you are proud to be a Bay Rat, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. I've often said this, that I think I think that coastal Mississippi is one of the best kept secrets in the United States. And for me, Bay St. Louis is, my favorite of all. I love all the towns, but Bay St. Louis is really, it's my gem. It's my happy place.
So listen, for people who have not heard us talk and people who've heard us talk, they know this already, but they can see you at iCyclone at YouTube. And I would really encourage people to go look him up and see the repertoire of media that he's developed from his chases around the world, literally. Of course, he's had reality TV shows. He reports for Weather Nation during storms, etc. So he's got all the credentials. And again, if there were Guinness Book of World Records, Josh would be the guy. That's why when he has a housewarming party and something that will probably be an annual event, people like Jim Cantori attend. James Reynolds coming over from Japan, for example. In fact, I should mention this to you, James, because you and I are friends, we've become friends as well on Facebook. And, he'll comment or like from time to time, but so interesting how he's paying attention to what's going on around there. He seems like a super guy.
Oh yeah, James is a great guy. He's my best friend in kind of the chasing community. He's also my closest competitor. Our friendship, has had some ups and downs, but we're really, we've learned over the years to be competitors, but also besties and support each other, because we're both global chasers. We both, chase all around the world, every hemisphere, and it's a very unique kind of lifestyle. And it's a weird lifestyle, and you need someone else to talk to about it. So he and I, we kind of give each other therapy and stuff. And we're real close. And he did come over from my housewarming party, which was awesome. He actually, because he came the furthest of everybody, he got the main guest room. That was his. That's because he came from Tokyo for that party. And I imagine he'll probably get it this coming season for the next one, which, by the way, you and Ann will be at.
Yeah, for sure. We will be, for sure. In fact, I checked the date, and it doesn't conflict with our annual family reunion down in Destin, so that's the good news. Okay, hey, so good. Look, Josh, as we're doing this show, here it is Tuesday, and we're doing this show, and we're going to come back to Debby in a minute, but since we're getting to the end of the segment, I didn't want to start the Debby chase and then have to cut it off. But we have a storm that's forming out in the Atlantic. All the models show that it's going to veer north and eventually to the northeast. It might potentially impact Bermuda. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. When you check the models, which I do on a regular basis, and you and I chat about this kind of stuff when we're offline. When you check the models, there's going to be a lull, it looks like. I mean, something could always crop up, that's for sure, because we're in the heart of the hurricane season, or approaching the heart of the hurricane season. But it looks like we're going to get a lull for 10 days, 2 weeks, maybe to the end of August. I see some little things kind of popping up around the 28th. And again, something could happen before then, but it's been unusually quiet, which means when we get into September, it's probably going to not be unusually quiet anymore. Is that kind of your read on it?
Yeah, my reading is the same. It's been a strange season. There were the big ominous forecasts, before we got into the season. And then there was that crazy early season barrel, earliest Category 5 on record, early July. And not only Category 5, but that thing was an epic. That was what we call a long tracker, where it wreaked havoc across just a wide part of North America, the islands, Mexico, Texas. And it just seemed like, whoa, we're really starting with a bang. Then nothing, basically. Then Debby, which was, I wouldn't call it one of the bigger events, but now we're, today's it's August 12th. So climatologically, when you look at a chart of the typical Atlantic activity, August 10th, just around now, is when things really ramp up. That's when the season really starts. It's usually around August 10th. And like you said, there's been this big buildup. Now we're at the climatological start of peak season, and The models are looking a little quiet. It is very interesting, and it does suggest to me that, all that kind of pent-up energy, that probably late August into September is going to be kind of wild.
Yeah, and one of the things they said all along, and some of them, they may have brought their numbers down slightly, but they're still, if you look at the numbers, they're still looking at a above average season. When we get back on the other side, we'll talk a little bit more about maybe this is more of a late season kind of ramp up. We'll see what Josh thinks about that when we come back, and then we'll talk about his recent chase on Hurricane Debby. We'll see you after this break with Josh Morgerman. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizen Bank Studio. As I look at my buddy Kyle, my partner in crime, the producer of this show, Kyle Curley, and thank him for staying focused, man. I mean, you can set your watch by Kyle. Over 1,200 conversations together, and just been a great partner. Hey, we're having a conversation with Josh Morgerman, iCyclone, the top hurricane chaser in the world, and someone who is kind of splitting his time between L.A., where his company Symblaze is located, and his home here that he will be living at during hurricane seasons, I guess, from this point forward, because he's a Bay Rat now, and he loves this place. Josh, we were talking before we went to break. They may have incrementally brought their numbers down some as it relates to the hyperactive season that we are expected to have. They didn't move them down too much, which really continues to point to once the season starts to ramp up toward the end of this month, into September, October, maybe even into November, they expect it to still be a very hyperactive season. Most of the experts you're looking at feel the same way, don't they?
Yeah, just because we're sort of starting slow, don't read too much into it. I liken it to, you're having a party and you tell everyone be there at 8, and like at 8 o'clock, like no one's there. And you're like, wow, no one's going to come. And then actually people do come. It's actually, you have great turnout. There's a lot of people, but no one kind of arrives on time. And I think that's how this season is going to be. It could be a little bit like 2022. I remember the same thing, kind of just sitting around, nothing to chase. It was just basically the Atlantic was a funeral parlor. And then starting with Hurricane Fiona, I started chasing. And then it was nonstop for like almost 2 months, basically. And I think that this season might be like that. They're good about not overreacting to, short-term glitches. It's like, okay, it's a slightly slow start, but they're basically sticking to their forecast, which I think they should, because the indicators say it's going to be busy.
Hey, it's easy to forget storms like Fiona. Of course, if it doesn't hit us, we don't typically remember it. But I was reading a story recently about Fiona, and did they retire the name?
That is a very good question.
I think they did, actually. I think they did.
Sure. For me, it was an epic chase, because it took me to some really far-flung locations. I was in a very remote part of the Dominican Republic for the first landfall, just in a tiny town, way at the southeast tip of the Dominican Republic. Just basically, you felt like I was at the edge of the earth in some like weird tropical place. And then the second landfall in Nova Scotia in Canada. So, you're watching like pine trees and Canadian flags waving in the wind. That was kind of weird. So that was a very weird chase from like the deep, deep tropics up into Canada. It was like, it felt like, I felt like Ulysses,
I remember so well, actually, the decision you made to go to the Dominican Republic. We had been there, I think, the year before, so I know generally where you went for the chase, but you had to make a decision. Where were you going to go? And when as you point out so many times, it's tough when you have to go do this island hopping to find the right, scenario. But in that particular case, you picked right, didn't you?
Yeah, that was one where the gamble paid off. That area of sort of Hispaniola, which is the island that the Dominican Republic is on, Puerto Rico, and then the Virgin Islands, and then the upper sort of lesser Antilles, that area is really, really complicated chase turf, because you just got a bunch of little specks of land, and you got to figure out like, okay, which one you want to go on. I dread chasing in that area, because it always involves some kind of gut-wrenching decisions. You got to pick an island, and it may be the right island, and it may be the wrong island.
Probably the ultimate example of that is Bermuda. Have you ever done a chase to Bermuda?
No, I've not. And actually, it's funny you ask because that very topic is on my mind right now. Right now, this thing that's forming, which is probably going to be Ernesto, looks like it's going to brush the sort of, the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico as a tropical storm. Then it's going to head out into the Atlantic. It looks like the only place that really is in play for a possible hurricane impact with this thing is Bermuda. And Bermuda generally I find it a very unappealing chase location because it's a little it's a tiny target. It's kind of a pain to get there. And they don't actually get very intense hurricanes. If you look at the history of Bermuda, at the most they'll get like a low-end Cat 3. They don't get the kind of crazy storms we get down here in Mississippi. So it's like a lot of work to get out there. There's a good chance of busting, and then you're not going to get an historic hurricane. So I hope no one from Bermuda is listening. I don't mean to sound like disrespectful, but yeah, it's not like high on my list. But kind of jonesing right now. Just want to get out on the court and hit balls, as I say. Like I want to just get out there and play. So I might end up just taking that gamble and getting really annoyed about it.
So let's just talk about Debby. What's interesting about your chase to Debby is that you had been in LA, you came back, you did the chase, then you had to give a speech in Baton Rouge. You covered a lot of territory in just a few days. And at any moment, did you feel like it was a little bit Groundhog Day for you when you consider what you experienced in that area last year? It's amazing that two paths of storms could almost be identical, isn't it?
Yeah, it was really weird. Basically, the Chasing Debby was almost a carbon copy of Idalia almost exactly a year before. I mean, down to I was, refining my position at the last minute on the same stretch of highway around the same two towns at the same time of day, like right before dawn. I mean, it was really weird. And I just thought to myself, wow, I am really sick of chasing in this area. Like I'm done with this area. Yeah, I was like, all right, please, like not again. So that was definitely weird and sort of like Idalia, Debby sort of underperformed, which good news for everybody there. Actually underperformed a little more. Idalia, the one last year, it briefly became a very intense, scary looking hurricane out of the Gulf. And then it just rapidly unraveled as it came in. So what came in was not as bad as expected. So we tend to think of Idalia kind of as like, oh, it wasn't that bad. But there actually was a lot of serious impact to some of that area of Florida called the Big Bend. It actually has a lot of the same issues that Mississippi and Louisiana do, where you've got shallow water offshore, which augments storm surge, and then you've got sort of flat, swampy terrain, which is not high above sea level. So like Mississippi and Louisiana, they're prone to big storm surges. And Idalia wasn't the storm of the century, but it was enough to do very serious storm surge damage in towns like Steinhatchee, Horseshoe Beach, and other places. So it was a big impact. They were just getting over that. Then they got Debby. Fortunately, it looks like Debby did not have as much impact, it seems to me. So that was the good news there. But yeah, the people there are really over it. One last thing I want to add. It seems weird. Oh, 2 hurricanes in the same place within a year. Again and again, when you look at hurricane history, this is actually, you notice this kind of clustering. Look at Louisiana, 2020 to 2021. They had Laura, Delta, Zeta, which also nailed us in Mississippi, and then Ida. 4 big impacts within almost exactly a year. Nicaragua had 2 Category 4s within the space of 2 weeks. Florida in the immediate post-war years, 1945 to 1950, had basically a Category 4 every year. So this is not uncommon that hurricanes, they find a place and then they just keep wailing on it. And it looks like last year it's been the Big Bend of Florida.
And you think about probably Debby will be retired. You think about the march up the Florida coast, the flooding in places like Sarasota, and then the rain event that it caused. And, all the models said it was going to sit there in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And that's it. I mean, there was a lot of disagreement about whether it goes back over the water and rebuilds and all of that. But the general theory behind the storm as it approached that part of the country was that it was going to sit for a very long period of time, and it absolutely did do that. What an unusual situation.
Yeah, what was amazing to me, the computer models are just getting better and better. You look at the track of the hurricane, it went over Florida, then it came off the southeast coast and kind of just meandered off the coast for like a day or two and then went back in. It was a weird track. That track was modeled. Like when you looked at the computer models showed exactly that track. I mean, they're getting crazy good. The intensity is still a little bit of a crapshoot, but the models in terms of predicting track, it continues to astound me. Doesn't mean they're always right, but man, they're starting to pick up the weird little sort of small scale ticks in the motion that you used to not see in the modeling. The modeling is getting kind of like very like accurate and high res. It's really amazing. It is interesting that Debbie's biggest impacts were maybe not at the landfall point, but like you said, the flooding in the Sarasota area, which was not directly impacted, that was sort of outer bands, and then of course, the rainfall in the southeast and the mid-Atlantic when it was no longer a hurricane. So it just shows you don't have to get a direct hit by the hurricane itself to have some serious
there's no doubt. Hey, listen, we'll finish up his Debbie chase, and then ultimately he goes to Baton Rouge and gives a speech. But we'll continue that part of the conversation with Josh Morgerman after this break. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have my friend Josh Morgerman, the top hurricane chaser in the world, who owns a business called Symblaze. They do marketing and branding, and he and his partner work out of L.A., have some very significant clients. And then he has developed this, what was a hobby early in his life, became really a business, the second part of his life, which is the top hurricane chaser in the world. He's living in Bay St. Louis, built a house there during hurricane season. So that's my friend Josh Morgerman. It's been great having you on the show all these years. Hey, I want to finish the conversation about Debbie, but before we do, I just wanted something that I thought about just as we were kind of winding down that segment. I wanted to make sure I covered this. In the year ahead of Hurricane Katrina. Katrina hit in August of 2005. None of those of us who were here will never forget it. I was co-leading the strategic planning effort for Knight Ridder, at the time the second largest newspaper company in America. And the week before Katrina hit, we had a meeting in San Jose, and I was out in San Jose, and I was at dinner with several of my team members and some corporate executives from Knight Ridder. And I'll never forget this. I had read a blog just prior to leaving, and there was this thing out there in the Bahamas, and wasn't much to it. But what they said was, if it were to get into the Gulf of Mexico, we were looking at the ocean heat content of the Gulf of Mexico was completely or mostly untapped, and the atmospheric conditions were really favorable. In other words, shear was almost zero. And they said that if something were to get into the Gulf, and a good seed, usually an African seed, were to get into the Gulf, that it could be serious problems. And I remember at dinner, I told the group, they said, well, how's it going? You've had kind of a quiet, well, I say quiet season. I think, we've had a couple of close calls, but we had been mostly spared. I think Dennis, I'm trying to remember the one that was the close call for us that didn't happen. They did a massive evacuation of New Orleans, and turned out to be kind of a screaming wolf, because when they tried to do a massive evacuation for Katrina, because of Dennis, people didn't leave. And so, unfortunately, that was a contributing factor towards so many people dying during Hurricane Katrina. But I remember sitting at dinner and telling them about what I had just read, not really understanding, I had no idea that it would actually come true, And I came back and told the team I was concerned about it. And sure enough, man, it gains, Katrina gets over the Florida Everglades and starts building steam. It gets out into the Gulf. It makes that now famous dip to the southwest. and then turned, and man, it did a beeline. And a lot of the conditions I see and a lot of the conversations that I'm seeing in the blog sounds a little bit like that Katrina year in terms of low shear and high ocean heat content. I mean, it could get scary if the right kind of storm were to get in. I'm not trying to alarm people. I'm just saying, just because we've had a quiet season doesn't mean that something ferocious still won't happen or can't happen. I'm seeing that, Josh. I mean, do you see that too?
Absolutely. I think that the Gulf is basically untapped. I mean, we had Debby, but that was like in the extreme eastern part of the Gulf, and it wasn't a major storm, and it wasn't out over the Gulf that much. So there hasn't been that much churn, that much upwelling. It's absolutely, the Gulf is locked and loaded. And I think folks just, really need to just be ready, just do the stuff that you would do for an approaching hurricane. Do it now. Get the supplies, get the water, get the gas can. Do it now while it's easy to get those things, and just have them. Those are things that you can hold on to. You're going to need them at some point, so you might as well just do them now and just be ready, because the potential is absolutely there.
Yeah, I said, I do a post on my personal Facebook page. I'll share it on the show every now and then. But just since I'm kind of a weather nerd, as you well know, I post for my friends and my family. I have family that live here, and then I have family in Birmingham and other places that always kind of want to hear from me. What do I think about that situation or this situation? So I post regularly. I get, my sisters will come on and thank me, and it's just my way of communicating to them mainly. But then there's a close group of friends that also pay close attention, and so I'll post from now. And what I said is, hey, we'll enjoy the lull. I mean, maybe it will be an extended lull. That's great. But during the lull, this is a great opportunity to, while you're not rushed, just to continue to get your water, do the things that you need to do to have your hurricane plan ready to go. In fact, I have a new neighbor in my neighborhood, and nice family that walk in front of my house all the time. But they bought the house catty corner from me, and it's got this huge old water oak in it. I mean, dude, this thing is huge. This tree reminds me of the tree in Pandora. This huge gigantic tree. And it's going to cost thousands of dollars to have it removed. I'm positive of that. I mean, the limbs on this tree are the size of trees. I mean, it's gigantic. But they're not from this area. They're from, I think, the Michigan area. And I said, what do you think? I said, your guys are good from a surge point of view, but we're at my house looking back toward their house. And I said, man, just as an experienced guy who's been through a lot of storms, I'm looking at that tree, and whoo, buddy, you better deal with that. And they had gotten a couple of quotes on it. And I noticed yesterday that 2 or 3 people showed up yesterday giving them quotes. But that's the kind of thing people need to do. If you look around, if you've got big limbs or trees near your house that need to be trimmed, this is a good time to do those things. And again, enjoy the lull, but don't drop your guard. Use this as an opportunity to kind of get ready. And that's my message. I'm sure it's, obviously that's your message too.
Mostly, but I want to ask: is that tree? Is it alive? Is it a nice tree?
It's a ratty water oak, not a live oak. So it's one that even the city says get rid of it. Yeah, it's got a hollow part in it. And it is not good. Yeah, right.
All right. I'm a little bit of a tree hugger. I mean,
I don't blame you. The
live oaks, in Bay St. Louis, which I know you were not talking about a live oak, but they're protected. You get a lot of trouble for cutting them down here, and I'm glad about that. I'm a hardcore preservationist. I mean, I'm always like, trees are like, history. You know what I mean? And
I agree, man. I agree completely.
Really
That's why I emphasize trimming. The trimming is a big part of that. And, what's happening, insurance companies are much more rigorous today, man. They look at the health of someone's shingles on their roof, for example, and they say, it's not like the old days. We'll write you, but you got to replace your roof. You're hearing that a lot more these days. And they'll say, we'll write you, but man, you got some serious trimming to do. I mean, these limbs can't be here if we're gonna write this insurance. So people are hearing about that more often, and I'm sure the tree companies are staying awfully busy these days because of that. So back to Debby. So you go and you chase Debby. I introduced you to one of my friends, Chris, who owns a restaurant in the Big Bend area. And 2 years in a row, he was on the proper side of the storm, if there's such a thing as the proper side of the storm. But he got lucky. Now, his restaurant, which you got to see, when they rebuilt it after one of the storms many years ago, they built it in a way that it's going to withstand probably just about anything that's thrown at it. I mean, you saw the amount of infrastructure and concrete pilings and how high it was and all of that. But, that's the way you got to build in that part of the country, isn't it, Josh?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was impressed. I ended up, Chris offered me the opportunity to set up there, which was so generous of him. And I ended up not going there just because that's not where the hurricane went. But I did go and check out the setup for the future. And yeah, there's that restaurant, which is just built to withstand anything. And then there's, he has a couple of condo units nearby, and then there's a bridge so you can put your car on it to escape the surge. I mean, it's a full chaser setup. I was like, all right. I said to Chris, I said, I'm definitely gonna use this as a headquarters of one of these chases. He's in Panacea, which is it's sort of the other side of the Big Bend, very vulnerable area, an area that if you're gonna ride out a hurricane there, you better be in a building like that, because this is an area that's just, when it gets a direct hit and when it's on the dirty side, it's gonna get absolutely just pounded.
Yeah, it is, and it's low, man. That area through there is very low.
Oh yeah.
So you did the chase there, and then without getting any sleep, you drove from that part of the country to Baton Rouge. What the world was happening in Baton Rouge that made you do that?
Now, I have a rule that I just don't book anything of any kind of importance in August, September, October. That's like I leave my schedule open, no commitments. I don't have house guests. I mean, I'll miss anything but a funeral. So basically, I had a speaking engagement in Baton Rouge on the 6th, and the hurricane was on the 5th. So as soon as the hurricane was over, as soon as it started to pass, had to, get in the car and just sort of fight my way out of the hurricane zone. And it was a tough journey.
Hey, what we'll talk about that journey over to Baton Rouge, but curious about what kind of speech that you would do this time of year. It has to be something to do with hurricanes, obviously. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Josh Morgerman. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have my friend Josh Morgerman, the top hurricane chaser in the world, and he wouldn't wish hurricanes on anybody. But let's make that very clear. And what he learns during those chases are extremely informative. I said this before, Josh, but if people would go to iCyclone at YouTube, and watch some of your videos, especially people who have not experienced storms before. But even if you have experienced a storm, it's a great reminder of when people go through this process of should I stay or should I go? What you're going to get is a great reminder about, in some cases, storm surge and how bad it can get. In lots of cases, how bad the wind can get. Can my house withstand that wind? Go see for yourself. Go watch some of these videos and be reminded about how vicious these storms can be. And then I bet you're a bit more conservative about how you're going to develop your plan to deal with storms that are especially major storms. Go see that. I think you'll be glad you did. So Josh, you did the Debby chase, and you drove to Baton Rouge to give a speech. As you drove there, I mean, you didn't have any sleep. So how did you do that?
It was brutal. So the hurricane was on the morning of the 5th, and the keynote address that I had to give in Baton Rouge was on the morning of the 6th. So, that's like a good 9-hour drive, and I had to get out of the hurricane zone. So yeah, I was on, no sleep. I was, just running on empty. So basically, my rule is, if you're a hurricane chaser, you're a storm chaser, you got to, get used to life on the road and just kind of improvising. And basically what I did is, I drive until I start to get that nodding off kind of feeling. And whenever I get that feeling, this is just a rule, pull off at the next exit, just park in a gas station or whatever, then just sleep in the car for like 30 minutes. Usually that recharges me. So, because, when you're starting to nod off like that, that's like driving drunk. That's like really serious. Like you can't drive when you're in that condition. So Did that a couple of times, got to Baton Rouge that evening. Thank God, pulled up in front of the hotel where the conference was. It was the Louisiana Department of Insurance's annual conference. Pulled up, didn't run into anyone I know, which was great because I just looked like a wild beast. I mean, I was like unshowered, unshaven, covered in mud. Checked in, cleaned up, just had a few hours that night to kind of basically rehearse my address, and then got a few hours of sleep, and then just had to jump in the next day. It was a little bit of a cluster, I'll say.
Hey, but that's in fact, I used to have some responsibilities for a news organization that was in Baton Rouge. I like Baton Rouge. I like being there. I know the hotel you stayed at, but that was a big meeting. I saw you post about it. For a group like that, I bet you can hear a pin drop when you're speaking to a group like that.
Folks seem very engaged, and I love that. As much as I like doing TV, TV is sort of it's very cold. You have to like emote and be expressive. Looking at the lens of a camera. When you're in a room with like 500 people, you're feeling the energy, and it's just more exciting. Folks seem very riveted. I wasn't just showing storm chasing videos. Whenever I'm hired to speak, it's important to me that whatever I'm talking about, it's kind of underlining the mission of what that event is, and also giving useful, interesting insights to the folks in the room. So what I was talking about, my big thing now, since I built my house, is about resilient hurricane resistant building, and how other consumers, other homeowners like me can do what I did to make their homes hurricane resistant, whether they're building a new home or upgrading an existing home. And that is like my mission now, to make sure everyone on the coast is doing these things. A lot of them are simple things that they can do to just avoid a lot of heartache and loss down the road.
Yeah, I know, of course, it's a big conversation we continue to have here in Mississippi. Lots of programs that are being developed to help people with fortification. From my time in Louisiana, I know this to be the case. And this is true for really any Gulf Coast state. All of them are having conversations about fortification today. They're in many cases, they're passing new building codes or fortifying their building codes. But I can imagine at that particular meeting in Louisiana, meeting with insurance executives, that fortification is a big deal to them, because they're trying to figure out how they can not only help families reduce the impact and become more resilient, but they're trying to make insurance rates more affordable. And the way we make them more affordable is we reduce the risk. And that's just a big part of the conversation.
Absolutely. The Fortified program, which is a program of IBHS, is, to me, it's a win-win, because for you as the consumer, one, you're having the peace of mind because you're building a home that's going to withstand really high winds, and also a lot of times you do enjoy a benefit with your insurance rates. Now, obviously, for the insurance companies, they benefit too, because it's less claims. It's one of these, to me, the Fortified program and building your house to be hurricane resistant. It's one of these all boats rise kind of thing. It's not like, okay, one side loses and the other gains. This is something where like everybody wins, to just build your house to withstand hurricanes. So that's why I'm really pushing it so hard.
And if everyone in the community did it, then we would have a fortified community, and therefore able to bounce back even better from all storms, all future storms. That's the ultimate goal. Josh, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Awesome to be back, Ricky. I always appreciate it.
Stay safe, man. Always worry about you when you go out running to get in the eye of these storms, but you're unique and you understand the risks that you're taking, and you know how to minimize those risks. It's been a pleasure, my friend. We'll look forward to chatting with you again.
Thanks, Ricky. See you soon.
Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.